West Africa has been home to some of the greatest empires in the history of the African continent. From the Empire of Benin, which has been added to the Guinness Book of Records, to Mali, which was ruled by the richest man to ever live. Let's take a look at some of these kingdoms. Starting at around 1500 BC, the ancient Nok culture emerges in what is now Nigeria. These people may have developed terracotta sculptures through large-scale economic production, with the earliest ones dating back to 900 BC. In 40 BC, the kingdom of Igodomigido is established. It would later evolve into the Great Benin Empire, known for its artful sculptures and great walls. By the end of the 1st century AD, the Wagadou Empire, which was also known as Ghana, had already been established, with its capital most likely being Kumbisale. This kingdom was, however, not located in modern-day Ghana, but in Mauritania, Mali, and Senegal. In the 3rd century, camel is introduced to the Western Sahara by the Berbers and served as a major catalyst for the trans-Saharan trade, which had been going on for quite some time now. This would lead to the emergence of powerful and wealthy kingdoms. By 300, Jenne had developed into a large walled urban complex, and in 690, the Sudanic city-state of Gao is founded on the Niger River. It instantly became a hub for fishermen and trade, and would grow to become a major manufacturing center, where craftspeople fashioned carnelian into beads, which are dated to as early as the 3rd century. In 700, the Kanem Empire is established around Lake Chad. This empire will be mentioned as one of the 3 great empires in Bilad el-Sudan by Al-Yaqubi in the next century. At the same time, Hausa City States start emerging, while Arabs initiate a slave trade that sends Africans to both Europe and Asia. An estimated 10 million Africans are sold between this time and 1910. In 750, Islam is introduced to West Africa, reaching what is now the nation of Chad. In 800, a series of walls which would be known as the Great Walls of Benin begin to be constructed in Igodomigido and continues until 1460. These walls marked the incremental growth of the city and spanned approximately 16,000 kilometers. The 1974 edition of the Guinness Book of Records described the Benin city walls as the largest earthwork carried out before the mechanical period. In the 9th century, Gao had grown into an important regional power, and by the end of this century, Al-Yaqubi wrote in his Tariq that the kingdom of Kaukau was the greatest, the most important, and most powerful of the realms of the Sudan, where all the kingdoms obeyed its king and paid allegiance to him. Historically, the word Sudan was used by Arabs to refer to the geographical region stretching from West Africa to Northeast Africa, meaning the land of the black people. By this time, a caravan route from Egypt to ancient Ghana via Kaukau is already established and in use. In 850, a highly sophisticated bronze metalworking culture is formed at Igbo-Ukwu. These people had already established a complex religious system and an economy based on agriculture and trade with other African peoples as far as the Nile Valley. Between 868 and 884, the old route from Egypt to the Sudan via Kaukau is abandoned, the reasons being attacks carried on the caravans by bandits, while others were overwhelmed by the wind-blown desert sand. The year 890 marked the beginning of the kingdom of Songhai. In 988, the Sankore Mosque was constructed with the financial backing of a Malinke woman. This would evolve into one of the oldest continuously used learning institutions in the world. In 992, the Empire of Wagadou captures the Berber city of Oudagost and gains control over trans-Saharan trade. Between 1009 and 1010, the ruler of Gao, Zuakusui, was the first to convert to Islam, and Arabic inscriptions start emerging almost instantly. The kings of Gao would be the only Muslim converts since most of their subjects at that time were not. In 1050, the Wagadou Empire is converted to Islam, and 5 years later, the city they controlled of Oudagost is overrun by the Almoravids, who were a Berber Muslim dynasty centered in present-day Morocco. In 1068, a geography text composed by al-Bakri is created. It will become one of the most important sources for the history of West Africa and gives crucial information on the Wagadou Empire, the Almoravid dynasty, and the Trans-Saharan trade. In 1076, Wagadou Empire falls to the Almoravids, which marks the start of its decline. In 1083, the population of Gao is converted to Islam, and in 1150, the ruler of Kano, which was one of the Hausa states, completes building a wall around the city. Kano will become the largest and most significant of the Hausa City States. In 1180, the Edo kingdom of Igodomigido grows into a very powerful kingdom, and in the next century, they developed an advanced artistic culture, especially in the production of its famous artifacts of bronze, iron, and ivory. These metal plaques and sculptures decorated the royal palace. In 1200, the Ife Empire of the Yoruba, which would become well known for its sophisticated art pieces, is established from the societies that had been inhabiting this area. During this century, the first mosque at Jenne, which would later be replaced by the Great Mosque, is built. In 1235, the Empire of Mali emerges in West Africa under Sundiata Keita. In 1250, Wagadou Empire is conquered by the Soso and submitted to the Mali Empire. By 1260, the city of Timbuktu is already the religious, commercial, and political center of the Empire of Mali, and in the following century, the city and Jenne were major southern stations of the Trans-Saharan trade in gold, salt, and slaves. In this year too, the first pilgrimage of a Mali ruler to Mecca is made by Mansa Musa. In the final decades of this century, Mansa Musa, who will grow to become the wealthiest person to ever live, is born in the Mali Empire. In 1300, a powerful Yoruba state called Oyo is established. Oyo never encompassed all Yoruba people, but it was the most populous kingdom in Yoruba history. In this century, the famous heads of Ife are made using the lost wax technique, with some approximately 3/4 life-size. The Ife heads are often considered a great achievement of African culture. In the early 1300s, Gao had become prosperous enough to attract the Mali Empire's attention, who annexed the city in 1325, but Songhai would retain control of it for 40 more years. In 1324, Mansa Musa of Mali went on a pilgrimage to Mecca with an enormous entourage and a vast supply of gold. During his journey, he spent time in Cairo, where his lavish generosity is said to have had noticeable impact on the value of gold in Egypt. This tour also introduced his empire to the rest of the medieval world, as Arab travelers would start to visit the region. In 1325, Mansa Musa visits Timbuktu and expanded the borders of his kingdom. During this time, Mansa Musa converts the Sankore Madrasa into a fully staffed madrasa with the largest collection of books in Africa since the Library of Alexandria, and housed between 400,000 and 700,000 manuscripts. This university would attract visitors from as far as Cairo in North Africa and Syria in Asia. During this time, books became more valuable than any other commodity in the city. Between 1352 and 1353, Ibn Battuta visited several towns like Timbuktu and Gao in the Mali Empire. He mentions that Gao was a great town and one of the finest, biggest, and most fertile cities of the Sudan. He mentioned there was much rice, milk, chickens, fish, and the cucumber. He also points out that the people conducted their buying and selling with cowries. During his stay in Mali, Ibn Battuta was informed about a powerful pagan kingdom to the south called Ife, which is thought to be an Arabic transliteration of Ufe, which in turn is the proper name for Ife in Central Yoruba dialect. He described it as one of the most considerable countries of the Sudan, and their sultan one of the greatest sultans. In 1375, Spanish cartographers crafted the Catalan Atlas, portraying West Africa with Mansa Musa seated on a throne, holding a gold nugget in one hand and a golden staff in the other. Following the release of this atlas, Mansa Musa became firmly established in the global imagination as a symbol of immense wealth. By this time, Ife's prominence had grown so much that it was even possibly mentioned on this Catalan Atlas in the Castilian Book of All Kingdoms under the name Rey de Organa, or Kingdom of Organa. The name Organa alludes to the title of the first dynasty of Ife rulers, who were called Organe. By the end of the 14th century, internal struggles and external attacks had torn Kanem Empire apart, and in around 1387, the Kanem capital, Jimmy, is abandoned and the people moved to Bornu on the western edge of Lake Chad. This marks the shift of Kanem to Bornu Empire. In this century, the kingdom of Igodomigido reached one of the golden ages in its metal workmanship. The others would be the 15th and the 18th centuries, when their workmanship achieved its highest quality. By 1410, Kano is the leading Hausa City State and had developed an army which included cavalry equipped with iron weaponry and armor. In 1420, many factors, including long spells of drought, led to Ife's ultimate demise. In 1430, the Songhai Empire becomes independent from Mali. Meanwhile, the Tuareg people took control of Timbuktu and briefly gained control over the western trans-Saharan trade routes. In 1434, the Portuguese established trading outposts along the West African coast in an attempt to tap into the overland trade in gold. And in 1441, Antam Gonçalves of Portugal captures Africans in what is now Senegal and transports them to Lisbon, initiating direct European involvement in the African slave trade. In 1440, Oba Ewuare came to power and expanded the borders of Igodomigido. At this time, the administrative center of the kingdom began to be referred to as Ubinu, which was corrupted to Bini. By this time, tales of Bini's splendors lured more Portuguese traders to the kingdom, and in 1485, some Portuguese arrived in an expedition and referred to the city as Benin, which would become the kingdom's name. By 1450, approximately 1,000 slaves per year are transported to Europe. In 1468, the Empire of Songhai under Sunni Ali conquers Mali and becomes the largest state in West Africa. Timbuktu and Jenne were conquered in 1468 and 1475 respectively. In 1482, the Portuguese built a fort in modern-day Ghana, which was then known as the Gold Coast. The fort was the first permanent structure built by Europeans in tropical Africa. The Songhai Emperor, Askia Mohammed, makes a pilgrimage to Mecca and he returns in 1495. On his journey home, the caravan consisted of thousands of camels, which had carried the materials to make his tomb, all sourced from Mecca. The tomb was 17 meters in height and was sealed when the emperor was buried. By 1550, enslaved people had replaced gold as the principal object of European trade with Africa. Between 1564 and 1596, Bornu reached the limits of its greatest territorial expansion, gaining control over Hausa land and the people of Ahir and Tuareg. By 1574, the Bornu Sultan had diplomatic relations with the Ottoman Sultan Murad III as well as the Moroccan Sultan Ahmad al-Mansur. Between 1578 and 1582, Imam al-Hakib demolished the Sankore University and had it rebuilt with the dimensions of the Kaaba in Mecca. In 1590, a Moroccan army invades Songhai and captures Timbuktu the following year. The invaders chose to make Timbuktu rather than Gao their capital, and the Songhai Empire collapsed after this defeat. In 1600, Dahomey emerges as the first of a series of slave trading states along the West African coast. The kingdom had the only female army in modern history, called the Dahomey Mino or Amazons by the Europeans. In 1661, the British established their first permanent settlement in Africa when they built Fort James at the mouth of the Gambia River, and in 1670, the French established a trading station at Offa in the Dahomey coast. In 1680, the Ashanti Empire emerges in West Africa with the golden stool of Asante as the sole unifying symbol. In the early 1700s, Bonu lost much of its power, and vassal cities of the empire gradually became autonomous, and a number of Hausa sultanates sprouted. The Oyo Empire was the most politically important state in the region from the mid-17th to the late 18th century, and unlike many neighboring empires, there was little, if any, Islamic influence in the empire. During this time, they invaded Dahomey 11 times, starting from 1728 until finally subjugating the kingdom in 1748. In 1804, Usman Dan Fodio initiates a holy war called Jihad that established an Islamic theocratic state called the Sokoto Caliphate in present-day northern Nigeria. 4 years later, the Sokoto Caliphate had gained control over Hausa land and several surrounding states. In 1822, Liberia is founded by the American Colonization Society as a colony for emancipated slaves. From 1824 until 1899, there were 5 Anglo-Ashanti wars between the Ashanti Empire and Great Britain and its allies. On July 26, 1847, Liberia becomes an independent nation, with Joseph Jenkins Roberts being the first president. In 1861, the British established a protectorate at the port of Lagos, which was the first step in creating the colony of Nigeria. Between 1862 and 1886, the British make several attempts to have a closer relationship with the Kingdom of Benin, as they were increasingly interested in controlling trade in the area. However, these efforts did not yield any results. In 1887, the British declare a protectorate over what is now southern Nigeria, and in 1893, French forces captured Timbuktu and destroyed the Tukula Empire, which was controlling the city, and in the following year, the French conquered Dahomey. In 1896, British forces invade and occupy the Ashanti Empire, and in the following year, a punitive expedition was launched by the British against the Benin Kingdom. They destroyed large areas of the city, including the palace and surrounding quarters. The expeditionary force also looted the palace art, which is now conventionally termed as the Benin bronzes. Some of these arts were accessioned to the British Museum, while others were sold elsewhere and are now on display in various museums around the world. The British launched an additional operation in 1899 called the Benin Territories Expedition against rebels and burnt down numerous towns and destroyed farms in an attempt to starve them into submission. In 1900, the final war between the British and the Ashanti resulted in the British burning down the town of Kumasi, which resulted to its annexation to the Gold Coast colony. Meanwhile, they also established the Protectorate of Northern Nigeria. In 1903, troops of the West African Frontier Force, led by British officers, take the city of Sokoto, and shortly afterwards, the Sokoto Caliphate is annexed to Nigeria. In 1904, France creates a federation of its West African colonies, stretching from Chad and the Cameroons west to Senegal. This would mark the beginning of the European colonial rule, which ended the African empires. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon in our next video.